When I grew up in India as a child in Bombay, I remember waking up in the morning. You would hear people doing their morning prayers in Islam. In December, you would have Christians in the distance who hung their star. People lived in relative peace. But in those kinds of old cultures, Kim, it's very easy for a Hindu politician to go among Hindus and say, oh, the Muslims said this about you, riled them up to get votes. Similar for the Muslim politician to go. So it's called communalism.
Yeah.
Because these are old, ancient cultures. So you can just say something negative and you can get people riled up. And that's what has happened. So Netanyahu doesn't give a damn about the Jewish people. He's a Zionist.
Yeah.
He cares about his advancement. He cares about his strata of people. He cares about Jared Kushner. He cares about what's going on in U.S. politics, who you can manipulate. So I would say nearly 300, 400 people in Congress have to be supported by the Zionist AIPAC, in order to get a position there. So the relationship between the financial systems, which are run by Zionists, and the hegemony that takes place in creating war is totally interconnected, because they must print money at will to support the military-industrial complex. So they need war and crises as a way to bury the fact that the financial system of the elites is built on vapor. And that's what this is about.
I think it's important for people to understand that not all Zionists are Jews. There's a difference, and we already mentioned that with Christian Zionism, but anybody could be a Zionist. Actually, you could be racist against Jews and be a Zionist, right? In fact, it would be in alignment with your thinking. You're like, hey, there's a place for you to go, and it's not around. So if you were racist, if you truly were an anti-Semitic, and you're like, then that's why there was this sort of collaboration in the 30s between those Zionists and the Nazi regime in Germany, because they thought, hey, we've got a common goal, and that is to move Jews. So you want us gone, and I want us gone too. I want us over here in our own place, and you want us gone somewhere else out of your place. So let's collaborate in this like common thing. And so
one point, Kim, it's very similar. So the ethnic cultural nationalism is very different than progressive nationalism. The Garveyites in the United States did the same thing with the KKK. Many of the people said, we want our own homeland back to Africa. They collaborated with the KKK. So blacks collaborated with the KKK. They said, we're in alignment here. You don't want us here. We don't want to be here. So that's the ethnic nationalism leads to this racism. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
And it's dangerous. It is such a dangerous thing for a Jewish American or Jewish German or Jewish French national, whatever they might be, right? It's so dangerous for there to be this country in the Middle East that says, no, we're your home. Not where you are, we are. We're your home. We're your primary home. We're your first home. Because then it breeds the anti-Semitism in their own countries, where people then look at them and say, who are you loyal to? Are you an American? Are you French? Are you German? Are you British? Or are you Israeli? And a lot of Jews say, I don't even want to have anything to do with that country. I'm an American. And now you're telling me I'm actually an Israeli? Like, that is going to breed hate. It's going to breed the anti-Semitism. And so it's dangerous for the idea, for that. If I were told, hey, Kim, guess what? We've made a new nation for Hapas. Like, we're gonna create Hawaii, the land of Hapas. They're gonna say, hey, Kim, you have to live in Hawaii. Your people are all in Hawaii. Everybody who's like you is moving to Hawaii. It's the land of Hapas. So that's your home now. Move there. And if they were to say, hey, yes, come live with us. But then there's this, if I were to be where I'm from, Idaho, maybe they'd look at me, which nobody ever did this. But if this was an ideology, maybe they'd look at me and say, why don't you live in Hawaii? Like, why are you here? Why aren't you somewhere else? And that would be...
Right. So Kim, what you're saying is a foundational theory of divide and rule. It's very deeply psychological. So if you think about what British colonialism did, not only in India, but Africa, the African kings had their boundaries, they knew what their boundaries were. When British colonialism went there, it randomly drew lines. It randomly started creating these boundaries. Okay, you're Zulu, you're this, you're that, etc. And that created massive amounts of war all over Africa. And that was very valuable, because then you could go steal mineral rights, you could go steal diamonds, etc. So this same concept here, the use of ethnic nationalism, is very powerful, because the British got what they wanted. U.S. imperialism got what it wanted, a base in the Middle East in one of the most strategic areas. So they're fine with these one group. They want ethnic nationalism. It's a very powerful force.
Right.
So in India, the same thing. That's why a lot of the Hindu nationalists are so in alignment with Zionism, because Hindu nationalism or Islamic nationalism, whatever ethnic nationalism you call, so the elites love ethnic nationalism. They don't want progressive nationalism, wars of liberation. Hey, we're these people, we've been oppressed, but it's still our land. We're not going to leave somewhere else and create some other plot of land. They love ethnic nationalism. Rosa Luxemburg, many very interesting discussions years ago, she called it cultural nationalism. It's a powerful weapon. And the British colonialists really know the power of this, and British imperialism does. I'm sure there's some Oxford professor who works for one of these Atlantic councils who's done the theoretical work on the power of ethnic nationalism. And that's what we're facing right now. We're facing the concept of Zionism is an ethnic nationalism. It has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. And so there are more Christian Zionists, I would argue, than Jewish Zionists. And that is what has had, it's a psychological operation that's being done on America. So to your point earlier, all these MAGA people who are so into free speech, so much against the mainstream media, they're all in alignment with the mainstream media. Yeah, let's go get those Hamas people. We got to reestablish Israel because they want to cause the Armageddon to come. They have it deeply ingrained in their mind. I did an interview a couple of days ago with a wonderful woman in Texas. She said, Shiva, I was brought up as a Christian Zionist. And it took me a while to realize that my own preacher was just making money off all of us. And he was very close friends with Bibi Netanyahu. So think about that. This pastor in a church in Texas is friends with Bibi Netanyahu. How do you do that? So Christians, quote unquote, Christian Zionism, as I analyze this, and I could be wrong, I don't think I am, has been the propaganda vehicle to get the broad masses of the American white working class supporting this ethnic nationalist ideology, which is Zionism, which is racist, and actually is against their own interest. So that's why I say Zionism is racism in the service of the swarm. Zionism is actually anti-Semitic. So anyone listening to this, if you want to arm yourself with the right discourse, if you have friends of yours who are Zionists, you have to say, look, I'm actually against anti-Semitism, and Zionism is anti-Semitism. And that's what the opportunity we have to break people from that. So I'm actually very excited after 40 years of having been an activist on this many years ago when Ariel Sharon butchered all those people in Gaza. 1980, I led one of the biggest protests against Meir Kahane. Brandeis is predominantly a Jewish university, right? So we used to have all these characters come in. So I've been following this for a while, but I think we have a huge opportunity with this to educate people. Zionism is racism. It's anti-Semitic for serving British and U.S. imperialism. Once people get that, people are going to understand how abused they have. Particularly the Christian Zionists need to get this. So that's why I think Mike Johnson was put in to reinstantiate that deep into the broad mass of the American working class.
Yeah, they voted for
Zionism.
him first time around, and he's like this known, very staunch evangelical Christian who, as you mentioned, his first act was to reaffirm the U.S. and Israel's relationship. And yeah, I want to actually read some of these quotes, just so that this was actually on your Twitter account. I want to read your tweet that really showcased the racism in Zionism, this idea that this is our land, and it's based, I think, any ethnic nationalism and any racism in general, actually, when you look at segregation, apartheid, when you look at any of these types of separations, it's because we can't mix with them is the ideology, right? We can't mix with them because if we mix with them, it's going to be an existential threat to our existence. That is usually the argument that is made, like blacks and whites can't live together because if they do, they'll kill each other. So that was the ethos under segregation. Same thing with apartheid in South Africa. We can't mix them. If they mix, it's going to be, hell's going to break loose. But these are some of the words, and a lot of people are saying it's Hamas, it's them. They're the ones who will not live with the Jews in Israel. They will massacre us. It'll be suicide. It'll be another Holocaust if we end the blockades, if we end the occupation, if we allow everybody to live on the land together equally, then it will be the end of us, and not just the end of the Jewish state, the Zionist state that says the Jewish people are the premier group in this country. America's for Americans, be you black, white, brown, Asian, be you Muslim, Christian. Is it predominantly white, predominantly Christian? Yes, but we don't have anything in our constitution that says anymore that this is a country that favors one group over another. In Israel, it is in their basic law that one group is favored over the other groups. That's in their laws, and they recently passed this. This isn't even an old law. This is a law that they affirmed again in 2018, and they continue to affirm laws like this. But these are some of the phrases that people have said. Daniel Hagari, Israeli Army Spock, says, "We are dropping hundreds of tons of bombs on Gaza. The focus is on destruction, not accuracy." So they're not trying to pinpoint Hamas and go after the bad guys. They're just trying to destroy the place. Here's another one, Ariel Kalner. She's an Israeli politician of Likud, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's political party. Now there's only one goal, Nakba, which Nakba to the Arab population means catastrophe. That's what that word means. And it back in 1948, they had a Nakba where 700,000 of them were pushed out of what is now Israel proper, and they were massacred and pushed out and put into refugee camps. And so this woman says, now there's only one goal, Nakba, a Nakba in Gaza that will dwarf the Nakba of 1948. Mind you, these are not old quotes. These are quotes from this current conflict. This one, Ezra Yakin, Israeli army veteran, says, wipe out their families, their mothers and their children. These animals animals must not be allowed to live any longer. Tali Gottlieb, who's an Israeli politician, also of the Likud party. Jericho missile, that's like a nuke, right? Jericho missile, doomsday weapon, that's my opinion. Powerful rockets to be fired without borders. Gaza to be smashed and razed to the ground without mercy. President Herzog, the president of the country, says it's an entire nation who is responsible. This rhetoric about civilians not being involved is absolutely untrue, and we will fight until we break their backs. And Maya Golan, she says she is racist. She literally comes out and says, yes, I am racist. I'm racist because that's self-preservation. She's literally said this. She's a young Israeli woman who is in a position of power, very controversial when she was made the Israeli Minister of Women's Affairs because she says I'm a racist, point blank. She says, I want to tell the world what they have long known about me in Israel. I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care about Gaza. They can go swimming in the sea. So this is the rhetoric that is coming out of the Israeli political group. This is not just fringe people online. These are people in positions of power, and they're saying very genocidal rhetoric. If this was reversed and these were politicians coming from anywhere else in the world and saying this type of stuff about Jews, but then they say Hamas says this about us, so it's okay for us to say this about Hamas because they say this about us. How do they get out of this? What do you think the solution is? This will be my last question for you. What would you do as president?
So Kim, when I found those quotes and I put them up, the reason I wanted to do that was to, again, education. I believe ultimately, I believe in working people do not want to live like this.
Right.
If you look at Malcolm X, who spoke a lot of ethnic nationalist rhetoric during his life. And then when he went to Mecca and he actually saw, wait a minute, these are all different people of all different backgrounds. And I've actually been manipulated by Elijah Muhammad, who was an ethnic nationalist. He created a version of Zionism for blacks, right? Mm-hmm. And after Malcolm came back from Mecca, he gave a very famous speech. He said, I believe there will ultimately be a clash between the oppressed and those who do the oppressing, but it will not be based on the color of the skin. 2 weeks after that, he was executed. So they do not, though the swarm it gets back to the central thesis does not want working people coming together to define what is in their class interests. That's what this is about. As long as we are fighting with ethnic nationalism, it's fine. So the United States is has a huge opportunity right now. And I think it's the opportunity for us to educate people on what is Zionism. So if I were president, I know the presidency is corrupt. I know the legislature is corrupt. I know the judiciary is corrupt. What would I do? I would do a video with you, just like we're doing right now, Ken, but we reach 8 billion people. The goal is one individual cannot change the world. We have to raise people's consciousness to understand that ethnic nationalism, this entire thing is not in your interest. The swarm is very clear. Power, profit, control. How is it to your interest to be supporting Zionism in Israel? What has it actually done for you? Well, it prints more money. Zionists share their capital among themselves. How is it to your interest? And this re-education, or this education, really needs to be done. And that's why I believe, in spite of all the horror going on, we have this opportunity to do that. And that education needs to be done from a systems understanding. We have to understand that there's a set of people who have a collective interest in advancing power, profit, control. That's why I'm grateful you went through the swarm video and we started this discussion on that. It's a good place to end it too. So working people of the world, the 8 billion of us, need to ask ourselves, what interest do I have in following ethnic nationalism? What interest does a Hindu have in India supporting Zionism? What interest do you have? What interest does a poor working class Christian have in supporting Christian Zionism? How has that served you? What it has served you is, since 2008, we've had at least 2 to 3 quantitative easings where we printed $33 trillion right now. And who did that money go to? It went to people like Elon Musk, who still controls Twitter, who still serves government, as I expose in our lawsuit. We don't have the First Amendment anymore. So we are constraining working people's freedoms. We are devaluing their labor. And ultimately, it's to cage people in the triangle of central bank currencies, carbon tax, and censorship. That's where this is all headed. And us supporting Zionism, which is racism, which is against working people's interests, is what people need to educate. So it's really a psychological operation that was done since 1948, Kim. And I think what we need to do is to raise people's consciousness.
Yeah. And I agree I think that the vast majority, you and I have both been over to Israel. Have you been into the West Bank? Have you seen the occupation? And
no, I didn't have a chance to go there.
It'll leave you speechless. It's unreal that this is happening in real time in today's society in a place that claims to be a Western democracy. It's unreal. But when I was there and I spoke to all these wonderful Palestinian people, there is no doubt, I agree with you 100%. There is no doubt that the average working Palestinian who's not in leadership, Hamas, they talk about this all the time and point it out in social media and on the mainstream media that, well, the Hamas guys, they're wealthy, they're off in Qatar doing they're not even in Gaza. So then why are you bombing the place? If the elites are billionaires running around, so the swarm of Hamas, their political elites, and the Israeli elites that are sitting there saying this genocidal rhetoric, and the Hamas elites that are saying genocidal rhetoric, right? The vast majority of the people people of Israel and the people of Palestine just want a better life. They just want to work and have a good life for their children, for themselves, have homes, have opportunities. That's all they want. And they could absolutely do it together. I have no doubt in me after meeting the Palestinian people, after being around in Israel and seeing the average Israelis, they could absolutely live together and have a prosperous, wonderful life, just like we've been able to do here in the United States. You and I, as people who are not white, we do believe that we can make it, we can work in this country, that we have opportunities. We don't have to be separated and segregated from one another. We don't need to live like that. And I believe that the swarm, like you're saying, the swarm of on all sides is just operating together for their own self-interest. You think Hamas wants to end this if these guys are making billions of dollars off of this conflict? You think these Israeli Likud party people want to stop this when it's self-preservation, they're making money and they're in the elite and they're the swarm? Nobody wants to end it, but the people do. And you're right, we have to rise up, we have to get the message out, and we have to say the people, this is for the people, this is what the people want. We want to end this division and this hatred and this rhetoric that's meant to divide us and keep us separated, just to keep them going, keep the swarm going. That's all we're doing. And you have really wonderfully pointed that out. So I really definitely recommend everybody watch the swarm video. Again, that is down below. Also, you have I noticed at the end of the swarm video, you mentioned you have an institute that people can learn from.
Yeah, what I did, Kim, when I got back from my Fulbright work, I realized one of the most important things that we can do to help everyone in the world is to learn the science of systems. I used to teach it at MIT to elites. The elites use the science of systems. They understand the dynamics of control. But that same knowledge, curriculum, can be used for us for our own liberation. So I put this curriculum together, and I realized that, like fire being brought to the masses, like Prometheus did, we need to bring this knowledge to the masses. So I created it, put it into a course, and people can go to truefreedomhealth.com and people can learn it. And if you're an adult and you learn it, you can then give it away to as many children as you want between 13 to 18. Okay. So it is the science of systems, in my view, that is going to be the liberating force. It gives people the tools to understand this so they don't get into the left or right camp. And that, to me, it's about raising human consciousness. We're at an extraordinary time where there's massive darkness taking place. It's an opportunity for people to raise consciousness. And if enough of us do that, raising a consciousness is also as an energy. It spreads to others. So that's the opportunity that we have.
So tell us how your campaign is going.
Yeah, so it's going really well, Kim. As you can see, if you look broadly across, when we're not shadow banned on social media, more and more people, you can look at it every day, say, hey, I'm going to vote for Dr. Shiva. I'm going to vote for Dr. Shiva. I'm going to vote for Dr. Shiva. Hey, this guy is the one who has consistently spoken the truth. Every Thursdays, we do a town hall. So for example, this evening, we do a town hall. Those numbers keep growing. But a lot of what we're doing, Kim, is to get people on the ground. As I shared last time, when people go to our website, Shiva for President, they download bumper stickers, but we actually have a very powerful flyer. It's old school, Kim, what I used to do when I was a student activist, right? A flyer, one-page flyer. The left side of the flyer really shares with people this curve. It's called the lifespan curve. And we're the first ones who started really sharing that, about the fact that your children's lifespan will be shorter than yours. And that it's not because of the vaccine. It's the issue of systemic policies that go back all the way to the 1960s, which really started showing up in the 1980s. And it's policies. And in that flyer, it says this is the policies of the swarm. And voting for the lesser of two evils, or even for quote unquote fake independence like Booby Kennedy, are not going to do it. You need a systems overhaul. And then we describe in that flyer what's a swarm, right? Where they can take their iPhone and click and go watch the swarm video. And on the right side of the flyer, because we have very little real estate, we explain to people who are campaigning is how you can get educated to take a systems understanding and come to our town hall. So our goal is to get around 50 million of these flyers on the ground. So we, in our movement, have close to about 500,000 people globally. So we've been doing a lot of hard work. Now, in every state, we have to get on the ballot, which means you have to have an organization structure. Typically, only the Republicans and Democrats have that. Fortunately, we have that infrastructure. We have leaders in every state. So it's a pretty large operation we're running. I love building organizations. I've done it as an entrepreneur. You have to figure out how to motivate people. You have to build sort of a meritocracy model. So it's all these skills that I learned. So it's a lot of fun. But most importantly, we're finding these amazing people who themselves are rising to the occasion so one person doesn't have to do it. And so the organizational infrastructure piece is really important in what's happening all over the country. The other piece is on the issue, we went into some detail on the issue of that why it's unconstitutional not to allow a naturalized citizen to become president. I'm the first one who also filed a declaratory relief lawsuit against Merrick Garland. And I can, if you want, I can share that, but it's a cover of that. But I'll send it to you guys later to put in. But that lawsuit basically says, hey, look, for three reasons, not only can I run and be president, A, I can run because of the First Amendment. Two, because of the 2011 opinion of the Federal Election Commission, which clearly said a naturalized citizen can run, but you just can't get federal matching funds, which I'm not interested in anyway. But more importantly, the 14th and 5th Amendment reciprocate each other, which again have never been asserted. The first article said that only men can be president. The 15th Amendment allows women to be president, similar to the argument as the 14th Amendment does. And most legal scholars agree with this. It's just no one has asserted it, actually said, hey, I'm running for president and I'm going to file a declaratory relief lawsuit. That's what we're doing.
Okay, great. I want to talk about the swarm. You just have such an interesting way of putting this out there. When a lot of us talk about, and we hear this all throughout social media, and many people are very concerned about this, the powers that be who are controlling things.
And to each other. The swarm, be it the Kennedys, be it the Trumps, be it the Bernie Sanders, they're not going to help you. They're all Zionists. They're part of this. Don't look to them. And quick pitch, Kim, people can go to shiva4president.com. We have a bumper sticker there we recommend people to get. My belief is the future is offline. Everything is controlled online. So I recommend people go there. There's a flyer we have on a download. Download it. You can educate people who is a swarm, what they're doing to your health and your children's health. The future is going offline. And if you really want to get educated, go to Truth for Them Health and start understanding how systems work. But that's the way out. It's education. Get educated or be enslaved. That's my slogan here. And that's it's a long game in that sense, but it's the ultimate game.
Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, this has been a wonderful conversation once again. Thank you so much for being here. And I do have all those links down below so anybody can find everything really easily, but wonderful, enlightening conversation. I thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kim. Great discussion. Very intelligent. I'm glad we had this conversation.